Anew advisors. Today, our webinar will be focusing on navigating the Anew roadmap. Glenn Colwell and Nick Schneider will be presenting. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Today's webinar will be recorded. During the presentation, you may ask questions via the chat. Otherwise, there will be a Q&A at the end. And without further ado, please welcome Glenn and Nick.
Yep, thank you very much, Liz. Just starting off with the disclosure and then the agenda for today's meeting. We're going to talk real briefly about who Anew is, go through our monthly education calendar, and then Glenn will go into how we navigate the Anew Advisors roadmap, and then we'll talk briefly about next steps. So this is our team, Anew Advisors. It's led by Glenn Colwell and Anthony Zilli, the two managing directors. I am Nick Schneider. I am another one of the directors. We then have Mike Bongiorno, our director of fire services, Sean Lauda, our director of law enforcement, and then Liz Notling, our director of operations. Mission, vision, and values for Anew Advisors. We really want to focus on our visions here. We believe in always acting with integrity. We display grit, and we try to make all the decisions on behalf of our clients and the information we give on trying to be future thinking and doing our best to be thought leaders in the industry. Next slide, Liz. Just a little bit of history of Anew Advisors. We started in 2020 with the focus on first responders, and our team combined has almost 60 years of investment experience and in the first responder field, so we can bring both perspectives to you from both a first responder and from the investment world. And this is our education calendar. Today we are on our May Zoom, which is learning how to navigate the roadmap, which Glenn will go through with you here shortly. Then you'll see the rest of the events that we hold monthly throughout the rest of the year. If you're interested in having this sent to you or attending any of these, please reach out after the webinar today is concluded. All right, then I believe without further ado, we will hand it off to Glenn, who is going to go through how we navigate the Anew Advisors roadmap.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome everyone for attending this. This is really a way for us to show prospective clients and as well as our current clients how we've gone through this this process, which we deem the roadmap, and you'll see why in a moment. It's a great encompassing tool for us to give advice and really understand where you sit now in your investment, financial planning, and savings life, and where we help to take you to meet your goal. It's a way for us to communicate very quickly and clearly with our prospective clients and our current clients. So right away, what you're going to see is you're going to see a speed limit 70. And what we do is we really aim to use terms that are able to be completely understood and be able to be understood very easily from us to you. So we start the same process most like every other firm, right? They're gonna send some type of questionnaire to you. We send a link to you. We ask a handful of questions. And really from our perspective in the industry of the investment management, financial planning industry, is we want to start to think where you're at in your goals and where you're at in your thinking in regards to what investments look like for you and what risk looks like for you. And that term risk can be interpreted several different ways, depending upon what firm you go to. Most firms that you will encounter with, like a bank, a brokerage firm, or insurance company, you'll answer a questionnaire, you'll come back, they'll label you moderate, aggressive, or conservative. And then they'll give you a recommended investment portfolio to implement for that. We don't believe in that. We feel that's a little cookie cutter. What we're really trying to understand is the psychology behind your thought process. So we talk in terms of speed limits and grade point averages, right? We all know how fast or how slow we drive. And we know what type of grades we've gotten in school, right? D's, B's, C's, and A's. It's just a measurement tool for us to turn what we have like fancy finance terms into data or terms that you can easily understand. So this is actually a real portfolio, and we took this off. It's a real portfolio of a first responder client. He answered the questionnaire. He came back, he wants to drive 70 miles an hour, right? So that we start to understand the psychology behind this, because white papers and studies have said over the years, when they examine personality traits, for those people that tend to be more aggressive, they tend to drive faster. For those people that tend to be conservative, they tend to drive the speed limit or slower. So it's not an end all and be all for us, but we're just trying to start to understand the personality traits behind the person or persons in the case of a couple that answer this questionnaire together. So he wants to drive 70. We then ask for a sample of all the investment statements that they want to share, right? So we're trying to get an overall picture of where you're sitting now. We know that pension plays a large portion of first responders' life, whether law enforcement or fire services. And to understand how that works in the portfolio, we do ask for a copy of your pension statement or a pension projection. And the reason we do that is because it's such a valuable tool for you in your planning and ways to plan around it to make sure we get you to your goal. What you're going to see, that number of 1.7 million, is really taking this particular person's pension statement and looking at their dollar amount, in this case, $3,958 per month, times 12, right, for an annual pension payment out to age 90. We always do our projections out to age 90. We don't want you to be the old guy sitting in the room with no money at the end of your retirement. So, and we get invited to a lot of retiree lunches, and we always see the old guys in the corner, and they're very thankful that they have a pension. And they're very thankful that they've saved outside of their pension in the form of 457s, RIRES, etc. But this is a way to help you understand how valuable your pension is. You would have to have almost $1.8 million sitting in a money market account or CD to be able to pay that monthly payment out to your age 90. And that is a great resource and a tool. It acts as an anchor in your portfolio. You then share your 457 statement with us. If your spouse has any assets, those statements as well. But the reason you're doing that is we want to get an actual picture of where you're at now. We take a download of all the holdings. So this particular case was an actual 457 statement with the actual holdings. And our portfolio accounting system and our software takes a download every single night of every one of these holdings, not just only for performance, but for cost and risk number as well, right? So in this particular 457, with the makeup of the investments, that account was driving at 98 miles an hour. Some of the underlying investments are driving at 99, some slower. We look at cost, we look at risk, we look at performance, we look at how they behave with other investment options within your portfolio. It's really meant to give you a very good snapshot of where you sit now. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the first responder spouse, she has an IRA rollover that they want to consider in their retirement planning goals. They did have a small health savings account that they wanted to look at and how to optimize that once they retire. What you'll see on the top right-hand side is at number 27. That's 27 miles per hour. If you glue together all of the investment options and counts that they shared with us, their weighted dollar amount is a little over 2.1 million. It's driving at 27 miles per hour. We know the pension drives at 1, right? It's a cash tool. There's no risk to it. You're going to get the payment out until your life expectancy or life plus joint, however you choose to use your pension election. But that really weighs down the speed limit of your overall investment portfolio. And this might be for the very first time you understand how valuable the pension is, how it works with the other investment options, and how you can be more aggressive in your other investment options to replace income in your retirement years. We also look at rates of return, which you'll see on the right-hand side is you'll see that range, right? So in any given period over the next 6 months, this particular individual is likely to experience a rate of return anywhere between down 3.33% up to 3.33%, 3.73%. We do not make projections. We're not here to tell you what the Dow or the S&P 500 is going to do next year, 5 years, 10 years from now. If anyone could do that accurately, they'd be sitting on an island. So our software is taking the actual holdings in your portfolio that you see there, taking a download of what they actually performed over the previous 6 months. It layers in a 2008 global real estate stress test. It then layers in the first quarter of 2020 global pandemic stress test, and it just projects it over the next 6 months. This is why it's so important to have annual reviews, right? When we have our clients, we offer an annual review. We run through the same roadmap process every year with the client as life changes, investments changes, saving dollars amounts change, etc. We want to understand where they're falling in this range and are they on track to meet their goal. We do assign a grade point average. So the system looks at how efficient is your portfolio, right? So on a scale of 1.0 to 4.0, D to A, is your portfolio getting to your goal in the most efficient perspective that it can in regards to cost and performance? We look at all the underlying variables of a portfolio. So we look at dividends, that's cash or stock coming off the underlying holdings as a form of a dividend payment. We look at expense ratios and we look at advisory fees. Again, it's a very good snapshot of where you sit now. And what I would say is the feedback we get from our law enforcement clients or fire service clients across the country is they really value this portion of it because this might be, again, for the very first time they've ever done this all encompassing. And it gives us the ability to have a discussion with you about why you've maybe made some decisions, or maybe you just happen to fall into this, right? We see a lot of police officers and firefighters around the country when they start on the job, they just get a form sent in front of them and say, here, sign this for your 457. And they really don't know what they're doing or how to elect the proper deferral amount into their 457 or even pick the right investment options. So this is a good tune-up along the way, if you will. So in brief, what does that do? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to start to understand what it is you have in that situation and where it is you're likely to go with just what you have. We do throw in some variables. Again, I mentioned life expectancy to age 90. You don't want to be the old guy in the room with no money, right? We do account for inflation. As you see here, we have a 4% inflation rate. As inflation moves up and down, we do move this rate. We will probably never use the headline number you've seen in the news. If you understand how inflation is projected, it's usually taking the last month's inflation rate and then annualizing out over the next 12 months. So we know inflation ebbs and flows. We know there's higher periods of inflation than others, and we try to account for that because that affects real world purchasing power in your day-to-day life. In this particular case, the first responder was retiring with saving $750 a month into their 457. They wanted to retire in 2035, and they wanted $6,000 of total cash out of their portfolio, including their pension. So if you recall, the pension was roughly producing about what, $3,900 or almost $4,000. So they needed an additional $2,000 a month from their other investment portfolio in order to create that lifestyle they want. This is a lifestyle process, right? So as you get closer to retirement, what is it you're trying to accomplish or enjoy in your life, and what money or how much money do you need in order to accomplish that? There's also goals. I'm going to pause here for a moment and let Nick talk about the conversation we have about real life goals or real life ideas that couples have or individuals have in retirement.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, so one of the main things that we want to look at, like Glenn said, a lot of this has to do with what you want your retirement picture to look like, what you want your lifestyle to be. And that means a lot of different things for different people. So in this particular example, again, this was a real first responder client that we had. Their goal was they wanted to be able to purchase a cabin and be able to pay the mortgage on the cabin. And so we have those included. We bake those in. One other big question we get, especially when it comes to younger first responders, has to do with, can I purchase a new truck? So we'll answer those kinds of questions. When it comes to those big purchases, we can show in real time how this line is going to move based on some of these larger purchases or goals that you might have. For some of you in retirement, it might be, we want a vacation more. We do want that second home. We want to pay for kids' college. Whatever that happens to be, we can layer that into the roadmap, and we're going to look at it in real time. And what you're going to see move is we want to know what the probability is of meeting this monthly withdrawal amount, that budget that you need when you retire, and still have funds left, and how long those non-pension dollars are going to last.
Right. So again, every roadmap is different for every individual because your current investments are different, your goals are different, your savings different, your monthly income needs are different. So it's really a great exercise to go through. And the way we've done this is typically when we are helping states and locals around the country, we offer this as a no-cost benefit and education event to the members of the locals we're helping. So we're happy to go through this. What I would tell you is how our whole goal is, how do we raise that probability to increase the likelihood of this happening? So we're going to just kind of show you a real brief synopsis here. What we did is we looked at the underlying investment options in the 457. We looked at the underlying investment options in the HSA and maybe moving registrations from certain types of 457s to IRAs upon retirement. And our whole goal is if we can get that probability higher through our investment process, decreasing fees, layering in goals, real life spending. That's our goal, our personal goal, and New Advisor's personal goal to you is trying to get that probability up in order to meet your lifestyle and income needs. And that's how we do that. We kind of just open up the hood on each of the underlying investments. We see if there's a way to optimize them. We see if there's a way to cut costs. We see if there's a way to put you in a better position.
And I know this might seem like it might be more pertinent to people closer to retirement, but whether you're within your first 5 years on the job or your last 5 years on the job, these decisions can have a big impact, especially when it comes to the younger first responders. The idea of saving early and saving often and making minor tweaks to things like your 457 options, if you're investing in your VIVA or not, or if it's sitting in cash. Those decisions can have very large impacts over the long term, as well as getting closer to retirement. Like, okay, how do I start planning to take money out? You've been saving for 25 years. You've been putting money into the pension. You've been putting money into the 457. If you're getting Social Security, you're putting it into Social Security. Well, now we're going to start taking money out. And that's another big conversation. And again, like Glenn mentioned earlier, the psychological switch of like, okay, how do I start spending my money and making sure I have enough?
Right. And sometimes there's little tweaks, like, so, you know, this particular person wanted 6,000 out. If we can just show them like real world impact, like hover over the 5,400. Like if you cut your savings by $600, you went down to 5,400. What does that do to the probability? Well, it drastically increases your probability to 93%, and you still have a balance at the end. So we can start playing with the variables of saving more, saving less, spending more, spending less, you know, in increments of certain dollar amounts to get you to a higher probability rate that you ultimately feel comfortable with and we feel comfortable with as your advisors. We then turn this into a written document called an investment policy statement. So when we have these annual reviews, we can always review back on what we agreed upon. And if we need to make tweaks upon that, it's a document that you sign and we sign. So it's a great tool, reference tool, and learning tool to help guide your financial decisions year by year through the course of your career and your life. We're happy to open up for any questions. Typically, when we do this one-on-one, you start thinking of questions, right? Like, hey, I might have had an IRA over here, or my spouse had an old 401k over here, or I might get an inheritance from my grandmother, or, you know, I don't want that new truck right now. What happens if I buy it 3 years from now? Like all these different variables start to play into this roadmap for you. We can open it up for questions. And then of course, if there aren't any questions, this is going to be recorded and distributed as well.
And obviously too, if you have more specific questions about you personally that you don't want to necessarily ask on a webinar, feel free to reach out to us directly. We run this for first responders all over the country. So when you have those specific questions, we're here to be a resource. So feel free to use us and ask those questions.
The chat Q&A is open, so feel free to use that. Otherwise, you can, as Nick stated, reach out to us.
And I would say for the law enforcement individuals that are on the webinar, Sean Law is our business director of operation, or excuse me, business director and development officer for law enforcement, former police officer and head of a local union in Milwaukee as a president. The reason we have business development officers that have walked in your shoes is they're able to talk to you in terms that you're used to being able to talk to, and you don't feel intimidated talking to us finance guys like Nick and myself. Sean's counterpart is Mike Bongiorno on the fire service side, longtime fireman, retired as a captain, and also a president of a local union here in Milwaukee. So We have resources that have sat in your shoes and are able to have real world discussions with you. So please reach out to one of those two gentlemen if you'd like to go through this process. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, everybody.
All right, that concludes our webinar.